All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone. Today, our Lunch and Learn, we are going to be talking about hospice, the top 10 myths. And I would like to welcome to this call two of my colleagues from Delaware Hospice. We have Emily Petito. You want to wave, Emily?
Hey,
There she is
hello.
behind her back. And Shannon Scott. Shannon is a care manager at Delaware Hospice, and they are social distancing today. So welcome. We have a number of people on the call. Wanted to let you know that this is really meant to be a conversation. We're going to try to keep this to 30 minutes because we know that lunchtime is very precious. And these lunch and learns are really designed to just get out there in the community, particularly during this pandemic, and provide some information that might be helpful for you, your loved ones, or the organization in which you work. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. There we go. So just for this welcome, Emily and Shannon, would you just like to take a minute and you maybe say how long you've been with Delaware Hospice? Maybe provide any information, personal information?
Sure. I'm Emily Petito. I'm a nurse practitioner here. Shannon and I are both working at the Delaware Hospice Center, where we spend all our time. So we are smiling behind our masks. We're 6 feet apart here in the office, but I'm sorry if you can't see us very well today. I've been with Delaware Hospice about 3 years now, and Shannon.
I've been here about 6.5 years, retired from Bay Health from critical care, and came here.
Thank you very much. I suppose I should introduce myself as well. My name is Nicole Fulmer, and just celebrated my 1-year anniversary here at Delaware Hospice. And we've been doing some of these lunch and learns for the last couple of weeks and plan to do them going forward. So at the end of this session, we'll tell you a little bit about what's coming down the pike. So for today, we're going to talk about the 10 myths that are out there about hospice. So I'm going to mention what the myth is, and then either Shannon or Emily can share with you about what the actual reality is, and maybe even share some of the personal experiences that they've had. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see if it says stop share. There we go. All right. So hospice myth number 1. Hospice only helps when you're on death's door and there's no hope.
I'll speak to that one. We find that a lot. The referrals come in late, and I think that that's where the myths come from. They don't realize that we can do a lot for the patient long before they get to that point. And I can speak from personal experience on that I wish I had put my mom and my husband into hospice much sooner than what I did. And we do hear that a lot from families, oh, I wish we had contacted you much sooner in this. I think it would have been a lot easier for all of us. So that myth I dispel every chance I get, because, and it still comes up, oh, well, you've only got 2 days to live, if you're on hospice. So, we do try to dispel that every chance we get.
Bonnie, yes, you have a question.
I do, and I don't mean to be loud and problem, but my mother was in hospice with Delaware Hospice, and she was at Brandywine Assisted Living.
Mm-hmm.
And after a certain amount of time, and she did not continue to decline, hospice said, you're no longer in hospice care. And I thought that was very odd or interesting. I don't know what, but it was uncomfortable because they had provided her a hospital bed in there. And so anyway, I found that interesting that they would come back and go, well, you didn't die fast enough, so we're going to take you off of hospice care.
I can kind of try and address that a little bit. So, as with any healthcare services provided, we are required to prove that the patient is meeting very specific requirements, and for whatever the specific disease is what the certifying physician is looking for. So it does happen occasionally that thankfully if symptoms are managed and things are stable, that a patient may not require hospice for a period of time. And we have seen that from time to time on occasion. And it's always unfortunate, but we also have to be very careful that, when we submit our documentation to Medicare, we are very consistent and accurate with what we're providing, and that they are, they kind of give us the requirements as to what the patients need to meet. So, that does happen from time to time. And, I can also say that we, when we have patients like that, I think the understanding is that we are keeping very close tabs on them as, just if anything should change, to then be able to recertify them and say to Medicare, look, now we can show you that they do need our services again, and hopefully scoop them up as quickly as possible to offer any assistance.
That's interesting. Okay. That part didn't happen.
Okay.
She was transferred to a nursing home and she died in the nursing home.
I see.
And it was Alzheimer's. So that's a very weird disease. It doesn't have a timeline. I get that, but it was interesting. So, okay. Enough said. Sorry.
So sorry to hear about your mother, Connie. Thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you. The second myth that we're going to talk about is hospice a place or is it a service?
So I'm going to try and answer that, Nicole. So hospice is not a place. Hospice is a service. So, as Shannon and I were introducing ourselves, we talked about the fact that we are here in the inpatient unit in Milford, which serves all of the state of Delaware. So we have 16 beds here where patients can come and be treated if symptoms can't be managed at home. Patients can also receive hospice services in the home, which can kind of involve all different varying levels of assistance depending on where they are on their disease course. It may be someone coming out just once or twice a week as needed. It may be somebody coming out as often as daily if needed. Again, just depending on where things are. And of course, that's kind of expected to change as their disease may change and progress. Hospice services can be given in a skilled nursing facility, in a nursing home, in group homes that we have in Delaware, also where someone is taking care of patients in a person's home and they are certified to do that. And even in the hospital. So there are patients that may elect in a hospital setting to switch to hospice services, and the hospital staff can help provide that, again, with our assistance coming in to kind of give that more specialized medical care at that point.
Yeah, sometimes I like to say that hospice will meet you wherever you are. So wherever you are, we will come and be there for you. All right, the third myth, and this is one that I've often heard. Hospice is only for people with cancer.
We do hear that a lot. I've had numerous people say, well, I didn't realize that you could go in hospice if you didn't have cancer, terminal cancer. And again, you speak to that, any terminal illness. It can be end-stage chronic lung disease, end-stage heart disease, end-stage Alzheimer's, anything that is a terminal diagnosis. And people just think of a terminal diagnosis most of the time as being cancer. They don't think of the other types of illnesses. And so we do dispel that myth as often as possible too.
Thank you, Shannon. Does anyone have any questions right now? I just wanted to take a pause. We've talked about a number of things so far, and you can feel free to put them in the chat or just raise your hand if you have a question. All right, hospice myth number 4. Hospice stops all of your medications. You know that is definitely not true.
That's definitely not true. So I think this is also kind of a discussion that happens ongoing, again, throughout your time with hospice care. So we are often reevaluating at the time of admission to hospice what medications a patient is on, what the risk versus the benefit for different medications at different times. So there may be a time where it's very appropriate for a patient to continue on, say, a blood thinner. We may find later in a patient's disease process, if they're having a lot of falls or other issues, that we have a discussion and say, you know, we're taking a big risk continuing the blood thinners because if the patient has a fall, they could have a very traumatic bleed, versus the protectiveness of the you know, that blood thinner may be giving them for other more chronic issues. So it's really a constant evaluation that takes place with the patients and with the family members and with the entire interdisciplinary team, again, wherever the care is taking place, to look at each medication. And you know, I think it really, in my mind, kind of boils down to, does it make you feel better? Is it helping with your symptoms? And if so, then we continue it. And if it's not, then we kind of really look at the plus and minuses. So we do like to get that list, you know, medication list, to a point where we know that everything on it is helping with the patient's overall well-being and not contributing to other side effects that maybe, you know, as we all know, can happen, that we take another medication for a side effect from another medication and it continues to snowball. So certainly it's just a conversation that goes on throughout, and we continue whatever needs to be continued to meet the patient wherever they are in their disease process.
And oftentimes it is hard to get them to stop taking certain medications because the doctor told them they had to stay on it for the rest of their life. So they don't want to come off of it. The families are a little leery of discontinuing anything. Sometimes, not always. Some are grateful that they won't have to be taking as many medications. But there again, you know, you have that out there that the hospice is just going to stop everything and you're just going to get morphine. And patients sometimes are fearful of having the medication stopped because they have it in their mind that, well, since they want to stop all these medications, I just don't have any time left. So there's a lot of education that goes in with that as well.
Thank you, Shannon. Actually, that brings us to the next myth, and you had mentioned about the physician. And sometimes people think that if they're in hospice, that there is no discussion at all with the physician anymore. Can you speak to that as well?
Sorry, having technological difficulties here. Can you still see us?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Because we can't.
We see like a tiny piece of you, Emily.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you can speak to that one. The morphine.
The morphine, yeah. So can you see me now, Nicole?
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
We got you.
Sorry, I should be very familiar with this after months of Zoom online learning with my kids, so I do apologize. But so morphine is a medication that we use quite often in hospice, and I think that, you know, I've had family members often, you know, call me and say, oh, you know, such and such, they started morphine, you know, this is it. And I find it even in my personal life that I'm constantly re-educating family members and friends that that's not what morphine is or how it's used. It's used as for pain management, first of all, and it's just another medication in a whole class of medications that we have to manage pain. So we, you know, if someone is starting on morphine for the first time for pain, we start at very low doses, and we may titrate or increase those doses as needed. And the goal is always to manage the pain while also keeping the patient's quality of life and functioning as high as possible. So, you know, and again, that's very dependent on where the patient is in their disease process. But we have patients that are on long-acting doses of morphine or even intravenous morphine pumps for months and months at a time, just managing, you know, their chronic pain, and they're able to function and maintain a good quality of life with that. So we often have to kind of address that and talk through that. The other thing we use morphine for quite a bit around here is for shortness of breath or dyspnea. It does help relieve some of that, and that's also something that patients could be on for a long period of time to kind of help with that symptom management. You know, with any of these medications, like we just kind of touched on with the last myth, they have side effects, and so we do talk again about the risk and benefit of the morphine. It can bring some sedation with it, so we try and really work with those doses to get the right dose and manage that well. Constipation is the other big side effect with morphine or any of the drugs in that class called opioids. And so that brings on kind of something else that we're all, you know, kind of working together to really manage along the way. But we, again, have heard this often, probably on a, you know, I don't want to say daily basis, but probably at least once a week, we kind of hear this myth and really try and constantly educate people that this is something, this medication is something that can be very helpful in symptom management and also actually improve quality of life, because we know if you're in pain, you don't feel like doing much. So if we could manage the pain with the morphine, perhaps it would even mean that the patient's quality of life, which is always the goal, would improve.
Thank you so much. You know, when you're talking about these different medications, are you in contact with the physicians? You know, because some people think that if I'm on hospice, I don't need to talk to my doctor anymore. Can you just speak to that and perhaps the interdisciplinary team associated with the hospice program?
Well, we are in constant contact with here at the center with our nurse practitioners, Dr. DeMario, our medical director, as far as meeting the needs for the patient. We have IDT, oh, there you're back.
Let me fix it.
Yeah. Sorry. We have IDT meetings, multidisciplinary meetings, several times a week to discuss each patient individually. That includes the primary nurse here at the center that's caring for that patient, our provider, social worker, and medical director, to make sure that we're making the best choices for the patients. And that always includes the family and the patient, if the patient can participate, certainly. But it
Do you want
all
to hear about the myths?
the family.
Thank you very much. Beth, did you have a question? I wasn't sure if Beth had a question or not. I heard something. Okay. All right. Go into myth number 7. Going to the Delaware Hospice Center means you're going to die.
Yes, we've certainly heard that one. When my mom was transferred to the center, you know, everybody just flocked here because they were sure she was going to pass, which she did. But, you know, I was able to educate people that our ultimate goal is to manage whatever symptoms have brought them into the center in the first place. The criteria for a patient to come from home to here or hospital or wherever is that they must have refractory symptoms that are constantly reoccurring that can't be managed in the home. Our ultimate goal is to get them comfortable or their symptoms managed so that they can go back home. Sometimes due to disease process, that just doesn't happen. But our ultimate goal is to get them back home.
It's almost as if you graduate from hospice in a way. All right. Yes, Connie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, again, I'm asking all the questions.
That's
Is that
okay.
common that you send people home?
Oh, yes.
Yes, quite common.
Yep.
Did not know that. Thank you.
Yes.
And
We
actually,
we're a short-term facility. We are not a long-term care facility. Our goal is to manage the symptoms as quickly and as efficiently as possible so that they can go home.
and we do have a program, a respite program. Shannon or Emily, would you like to speak to that? I think that's something that not a lot of people are aware of.
Sure, I can touch on that. So our patients are, as part of the hospice benefit, and all hospice patients are eligible for respite care, which means that and it can happen here in the center, or it can happen at other, skilled nursing facilities, but it gives the caregiver that respite or break from caregiving. As I'm sure all know, anyone that's cared for a loved one, that the continuous care is quite taxing. And if you can't, take the time to care for yourself, of course, you can't provide that care for your family member. So we do offer respite stays. It's usually about 5 days. And what would happen is that the patients will call, or the family members will call our social workers and arrange for a stay here. Say they have an upcoming graduation out of town, or wedding, or holidays that they're going to be traveling for, or just need kind of that time to get appointments done and all the sorts of things of daily life. That time can be scheduled here, and they're cared for in our facility, or again, can be cared for in other facilities that we have contracts with as well. And we try and kind of offer those services as much as we can, and have bed availability here to really give the caregivers the care that they need as well.
It's such a wonderful program, and I've spoken to families that, were able to take a mini vacation, or, to just get away knowing that their loved one was in good hands and being
Absolutely.
cared for.
Right.
It's definitely a wonderful program. For the next myth, this is a little bit about referrals. And some people think that only a physician can make the referral. So if you could talk to that next.
So that is a myth. That is not true. Anyone can refer to hospice. So we get our referrals from all types of places, including the patients themselves often. So they can contact us directly through our referral line. And what would happen is that our referral center will kind of walk through what our services are, what are available. And then the next step would be to, with the patient's permission, to contact their medical provider and get their medical records. And so we can kind of determine what program they would fit into. So again, this can happen really from anyone and anybody. We often hear, that they heard about our services from a family member, from a friend, knew from previous, and just called up and to kind of see what was out there. A lot of times too, I think, obviously, most of the time this isn't a decision that's made overnight to enroll in hospice services. So we find a lot of times that a referral may be made, and we may go out and have a visit and, just kind of talk through things. And a week or two later, or even, months later, they may say at that time, I'm not ready for it, but let's come back and just kind of talk again, down the road, as things may change or our needs may change. So making that referral oftentimes is just kind of the touch point to kind of start the conversation and get the ball rolling. And once we have that contact, we may find, sometime down the road is a better time to enroll in our services. But once that referral is made, we can kind of keep track from there.
And sometimes the referrals, the person making the referral may not be familiar with all the services that Delaware Hospice has to offer. The patient may not be appropriate to meet the criteria for full hospice, but may meet the criteria for our MCCM transitions or palliative. So there again, dispelling the myths of end of life, with hospice means that, you only have a few days left. With these other programs, oftentimes they may not meet the criteria for full hospice, but very well could meet the criteria for the others.
I think that is such a wonderful part of our organization, that there is a program for just about any age, and whatever the serious illness might be, even for infants and children, like our Katie program, for example. So I think that's one of the great things about our referral centers, when those calls come in, that they can speak to the people and really find out what is going, and then make the best decision for the family. We have two more myths. This number 9 is regarding cost of hospice. And a lot of people think that hospice costs too much. So Shannon or Emily, if you could speak to that.
Hospice is covered by Medicare Part A, most Medicaids, and most private insurances, as long as the patient meets the criteria of those insurance providers. But Delaware Hospice is unique, as they're not for profit, and we do accept patients that have no insurance or no visible means to pay. No one's turned away, either as an inpatient or home care, which makes us very unique, because I think all the other hospices in Delaware are for profit.
Yeah, we've been around since 1982, so we've been in the community a very, very long time. And then the final myth, can you speak to, is hospice just for the patient or also for the family?
Yep. So the services we provide are for the family, as well as the patient. Of course, our goals of care are always to manage the patient's symptoms and optimize their quality of life, and really to meet whatever goal that they have, whatever is important to them. And that those conversations all involve the family members as well. There's many resources, supplies, equipment, all those sorts of things that would fall onto a caregiver's laps that we help assist in. And so part of it, I think, is physical assistance with that sort of thing, and then the other piece of it is the emotional and social assistance with what the family members are going through during this time, as well as their loved one is on hospice. So we often find, I just had a conversation with a patient very recently that, or with the patient's spouse actually, and he said, she is at peace with this and she's comfortable, but it's still very, very hard for me. And so, part of that support, the patient kind of is comfortable with where she is, but we need to, continue to offer support to her spouse as he kind of makes adjustments and deals with what's going on. So our chaplains, of course, are available to help. Our social workers, our entire interdisciplinary team kind of addresses and tries to, our bereavement counselors, thank you. So we often identify patients here at the center whose family members may need early bereavement, which are the services that we offer after a patient passes, to really provide support for the family members. So those services extend even after a patient has passed. So sometimes we need to identify those family members early on that may, we realize are going to really need extra support, and refer them as well. So there's all types of different services. The last one I'll mention very briefly is New Hope, which is for children of our patients, children, grandchildren, any young adult that's in the home or in the life of a patient, and we believe will need extra support. We offer that to all our patients. A counselor that's dedicated just to working with these kids who are going through a loss of their own, and as well as our camp, which I know was just wrapped up and was held virtually this year, but usually held here on the grounds for our New Hope kids that have had experienced some sort of loss in the last year. So it really extends to the entire family.
And I think one other thing that we provide, well, not just one thing, is education to our families, so that they're better able to care for their loved one in the home. We're not all born caregivers, you know, and a lot of them want to be able to provide the care, but they just don't know how, or they don't have the tools in the home or the knowledge base to do that. Our home care team does a very good job teaching about being caregivers and how to provide care for maybe a newly bedbound patient who last week, you know, was cutting grass, but this week is now bedbound and incontinent. That's a pretty scary thing to have to deal with if you've not ever had to deal with that. So a lot of education is provided. We did a lot of education here at the center with our patients' families before we sent them home. But since the pandemic, we're more limited in what we can do with that. But we can provide videos and instruction with that, and via the phone and telecommunications to help with that.
And there's a lot of these resources, videos and articles that are on the website for Delaware Hospice that can help. And one thing I'll just say on a personal note, when my husband died a few years ago, and he was not on hospice, he had had a heart attack, I found out that my children could benefit from Camp New Hope and that bereavement program. So even though he was not even in hospice, as a nonprofit organization, we assist the entire community. So we were able to take advantage of that. So it's something that I like to pass on to people about the bereavement services that are available to anyone. And again, that information is on our website. So Shannon and Emily, I'd like to thank you both very, very much for taking time out of your schedules to go through these myths. And I'll just take a moment. I know we're right about at time, but I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully that worked. And just let you know of some of the upcoming lunch and learns that we have for the rest of this month. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between hospice and palliative care. Something I was never familiar with before I even started here about palliative and how important that is as something that we offer. And then on the 17th, we'll be talking about pain and how pain can be managed through our programs and give you some more information. And then the last Thursday of the month, we'll be talking about more from a caregiver perspective. What does it mean to you if, say, mom or dad were in a hospital and they've come home and you're taking care of them, but you also need to take care of yourself? And we touched on that a little bit with the respite discussion. So we'll be delving into that from a caregiver's perspective. And again, we are here for you as your community hospice. We can answer questions, provide you resources. We're just a phone call away. Just mention to some of our corporate sponsors who help make these things possible, particularly as we have pivoted from a lot of these in-person events to the Zoom sessions with the community. So again, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. And I will stay on after this, and perhaps maybe even Emily and Shannon, if they have a few moments, if you would like to ask any other questions. So again, thank you all, and continue to social distance and wash your hands, stay healthy, and have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.